Welcome, welcome you dangerous writers, and this episode is all about red hot dialogue. So put on your best and fluffiest onesie and come and join me next to this roasting fire. What could possibly go wrong? Okay, so firstly, let's start with a pretty obvious fact. Clever dialogue is not the same as just rambling on like a pair of ramblers going on a long rambling holiday, like I'm doing now, except we're not going on holiday. For the worksheets that accompany these videos and loads more support for writers, then please visit www.clickimagination.com or follow the link thusly. And please show your support for this channel by jabbing the little like button down there. If your screenplay takes this kind of form, which is that you have a strip of action across the top and a single column of dialogue, what's often called a T-shape, then chances are you're using dialogue to actually tell the story rather than visually dramatizing the story. Or you're using all that dialogue to dig yourself out of structural or plotting problems, in which case, stop digging and start dramatizing. Start playing around with dramatizing your story without any dialogue whatsoever. So that's no spoken words. Have a little bit of fun of trying to understand how you can convey what might be plot or character traits by only visualizing them. It becomes a bit of a challenge at first, but trust me, over time it becomes easier and easier to understand how you can visually represent those feelings on screen. Then it's possible to peel that back by adding dialogue that adds greater depth and value to that story. Remove anything from your screenplay dialogue that isn't absolutely essential. So anything that duplicates or is just fat in the sentence. It's amazing with a bit of trimming how much you can remove, and also how much more emphasis it puts on those words and how much authenticity it adds to the dialogue when spoken. Careful in using dialogue to explain information to the audience. The scene is actually a setting between 1, 2, 3 characters, and the information that's conveyed is relevant to the story in that dialogue. It's not about trying to get information across to the viewer or reader. Doing so is called on the nose, and it really stands out a mile. Avoid it. It's a common mistake to simply assume that less dialogue is better, and true efficient use of dialogue is hugely important, but also don't be afraid of it. Depending on the type of scene and character, etc., it may have a justifiable place and also would help to add zing and depth to the story. If you find it easy to simply transfer spoken dialogue from one character to another character, then that should start to ring alarm bells, particularly because it might mean that one of the characters is actually superfluous. Try and think of dialogue as the lowest common denominator in communications. After all, actually the spoken word is only something like 7%. The rest of the communication is through facial expressions, movement, body language, etc. So if you're relying on large chunks of dialogue, then actually you're missing a trick. Trying to convey that information through the movement and behaviours of actors catches viewers and readers on a much deeper level, and it also makes your screenplay a lot more interesting to read. Not all verbal communication requires a response. For example, one character saying, "How are you today?" could be responded with. Dialogue is best, arguably, and certainly brilliant when actually it contradicts the visual action that the viewer sees on screen. For this way, you can be conveying a certain feeling through dialogue, but it's quite clear that the character actually really feels or thinks another way. This is great for creating that depth in the character and ultimately in the story. Thanks for watching, and please show your support by liking and subscribing. Everyone is absolutely brilliant. In fact, it's a bit like having my hair brushed by a glistening mermaid. Just lovely. See you next time.